Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Detection at Scale. Today, I'm here with George Werbacher, who is the head of security operations over at Live Oak Bank. George, how are we doing?
Doing good, Jack. How are you doing?
Well, as I was just mentioning to you, I just came back from Japan, so I'm very jet lagged. I was living 16 hours ahead of where I currently am, which is in San Francisco. So my body thinks that I should be asleep right now, but it's nothing that a little coffee can't fix.
There we go. Yeah, definitely jealous of your travel. Not jealous of your jet lag, but like an awesome trip. So
It was, yeah. I highly recommend folks visiting if they haven't already. It often ends up being a bucket list item for a lot of people. I think just because it's just so far and such a different culture typically from what Americans are used to. But, aside from that, would love to get your background and how you got into SecOps and what you're working on right now at Live Oak.
yeah, absolutely. So I'll say that my background originated from the academic world. So started fresh, in undergrad, not knowing what I wanted to do. I didn't even really want to go to college when I was in high school. So as you'll hear through my academic career, it's kind of ironic where I ended up, but got introduced to cybersecurity late into my undergrad career from a professor that, I had one of those experiences where you have a good professor kind of shaped your entire life afterwards. So from there, he introduced me to Carnegie Mellon, which is where right after undergrad, I went to grad school and completed studies there, focusing on information security and policy. I took a weird route. So I like to say that I'm a pretty technical person. I've always enjoyed technology, but when it came to security, I really wanted to focus more on the risk lens of things first. This came from a conversation I was having with my program director at grad school, trying to see like what I should focus on, what I should do. He said, a lot of students can do very technical while you're in school, or you can focus on, the more strategic and risk side. So I picked that side. The least sexy part of security, but it really kind of shaped where I ended up, which of course, given the podcast is SecOps. So right after school, I actually went to a smaller tech company up in Boston. I was one of the early security members, started as an intern, went into full time, and that's where I started kind of my SecOps journey and did that for about 2 years. And then I wanted more experience at a larger organization. So decided to jump headfirst into the financial sector. So did a stint at Capital One during their cloud migration to AWS. There, I was part of the information security office, which in a general sense is a BISO organization. So a lot of the work I was doing was very ingrained with the developers that were transitioning their platforms to the cloud at that time. We were, under a full transformation. Everything was going to AWS. So every team was either, lifting and shifting or refactoring or, doing all over the place. So got a ton of exposure there and, started to grow it into the cloud as my expertise. From there, I jumped around some other financial services places, did some cloud security there, and then ended up in Charleston, South Carolina at a company called Blackbud, where I built out a BISO program for the CISO there, who is also my current CISO at Live Oak Bank. So did some stuff there, ended up running the GRC team as well, along with the customer trust organization, which was an extension of the sales team and the sales go-to-market effort. So that team was the one that, answered all the customer questionnaires or fielded questions from potential customers because the platform was a SaaS platform. So of course we got, many questionnaires from the sales pipeline. So taught me a lot about interacting with customers from a security side and kind of what they were focused on and not seeing it from, my side from a third party risk piece. Then ultimately, wanted to leave there, came to Live Oak Bank where I am now, started out in kind of the corporate security realm. So doing a lot of the corporate security stuff such as DLP, and then that transitioned over into an architecture role. And then earlier this year, I took over for all of security operations. So now that bucket includes not only what I was originally doing with architecture and engineering, but then now all the threat detection, response, vulnerability management, pen testing, kind of all that stuff. So I'm at a point in my career where I'm excited to be back in the tech space. So I'm tinkering a lot, playing with a lot of new technology. And as we'll probably talk about through our conversation, we're exploring a lot of new SecOps type technologies that are making us very excited for the future. So
Does it rhyme with AI?
It does rhyme with AI.
To the background, no, it's super helpful. It seems like you've had a lot of different hats throughout the journey. Do you think that that's really helping you now in SecOps, where SecOps kind of ends up being the combination of a lot of those things?
I would say that the journey that I had really helped show how security integrates with an organization. So, being both in kind of that BSO realm and then, career goals for mine is to be a CISO one day. And so from my mentorships and things like that, understanding how security fits into what's the broader scope of an organization, what's the priorities, and then how do we manage those expectations with the threats and everything else that's happening outside of our control. How do we bring kind of a risk lens to that? So I would say that it's definitely helped in how we are approaching some of these conversations, and not only understanding and integrating well with the business, but then the architectural background as well is helping, see the full picture of our technology stack. How well are things integrated? What are we planning for with the wave of AI? What's everything going to look like in 2 to 5 years? And how do you plan for that, while still building the foundation of just protecting an organization, boots on the ground and things like that. So I'll definitely say that that risk background really helped me craft the narratives that I need to, but then kind of understand the realistic nature of, you know, getting more funding or, pushing for more resources in a certain area because of the threats that we're seeing or of the attacks that we're seeing. So it helped kind of bring, that side of stuff to it. But I would say outside of that, yeah, definitely, especially being a cloud first organization like Live Oak, it's definitely helped from that piece when we start talking about the cloud as well.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. From an evolution perspective, I mean, what's the biggest change you've been seeing lately as we've started embracing AI? Like, what is it actually in reality? I could talk about it from the lens of how we see things evolving, right? Everything's going to be agents and everyone's going to use MCP or whatever, but what's actually reality today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, I followed into or fell into the hype very early this year when I started to get my hands on, the cursors and the Claude codes of the world of, oh wow, this stuff is great for, someone that's technical but didn't have the background to go through and learn a coding language or do it for multiple years. So started to see the power very early on. And I'd say kind of where I ended up is that I am a very big advocate for AI, but I think that there is a difference between what's hype and then what's real. And kind of understanding that through both a journey that we were doing at Live Oak when it comes to, how can we modernize our tech stack? How can we make use of AI within the organization? Our CIO is really pushing, how can we use AI to get kind of just operational efficiencies, automate stuff across the board. So it kind of started out as like a personal exploration around, okay, well, what is AI? I'm someone that, likes to hyper focus on certain things here or there. So I don't know if it's the neurodivergent in me or not, but I ended up, diving deep into the LLM world and just trying to understand what AI is. It started to, build out agents and understand the event loop and kind of like see what everything looked like under the hood, like what is actually happening. That's then, transitioned over to now building agents within the team, and where we're seeing the immediate value. I was actually on a conversation earlier today about it, is when we saw the rise of Cursor and like Claude Code, like I said, like the first thing that was huge to me was like, oh wow, I can go build something. I don't need to, look at all the arithmetic or learn the new coding languages or things like that. I can just through natural language have a conversation and it build what I needed to build. And that wave's been huge, obviously. What we're starting to see in SecOps and what we're pushing for from an agent side is, can I bring that same idea over to my analyst and to my team? So when we're doing an investigation and we're going through the steps, oh, hey, let's go look at this user and see what this user did or what do they have access to. Where we're starting to see AI be most beneficial from that piece is, okay, well, I don't need to know the query language. I don't need to know the index. I don't need to craft the perfect query to answer the question I'm trying to answer. Instead, I can naturally start to point and drive AI towards that answer to then give me the results. And that's then when I started to see like the real power of what was out there. and kind of navigate the hype that was surrounding, everything. And then through building that, because a lot of the stuff we were building in-house, so much so that, we tested things with LangChain, started to use some stuff with Trans, and we ultimately just started to build our own SDK and just using just raw Python. I think that taught me the most out of everything of, how do you keep an agent in a loop to keep going and going and going while also giving it the guardrails to stop. I would say that that's been a journey over the past few months to really understand what's going on in the back end. And it weirdly shed some light to what it is, and that all this is just a raw call to an LLM and just how you craft the context with it. So it's been a very fun journey, lots of late nights kind of building and just tinkering. But I think from our side, how do we get the operational efficiencies to push my team closer into, you know, investigating and responding to alerts using natural language. I think as we get closer and closer to that, we'll start to see more and more of the benefit that AI is going to actually give to the team. So there's a lot more wrapped up in that, of course, that we can hit on, but that's the best way I can summarize it.
I would double click a little also on your journey through agent creation, and probably what came with that is also prompt engineering, building tools. Those skills, just from a mindset perspective, are so, so critical to getting the most out of agents.
100%. The managing the context alone, I think when you see that problem firsthand and then you try to solve that problem is crazy. And then you tie in the memory components and all that stuff that then you start to tack on to this just regular raw LLM call. Now it becomes, how do you maintain conversation history? How do you not bloat the context? And like you're saying, it was very great to learn how it's happening, because then, as I'm using Cursor and Claude Code, and, again, through my background, I'm not a developer. I've been around developers a lot, and I've always, respected and appreciated them. But being able to see like why Claude Code is always summarizing its context and why Cursor is always summarizing and how it's handling the to-dos and the tasks, like all that agentic behavior, having to build it out, you're really learning a lot firsthand. And that's been the quickest experiment for me, is just all that.
We're also learning a lot as an industry right now. So techniques that we try right now are going to probably look a little different as foundation models change and like context windows get bigger, reasoning abilities are better, et cetera.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been especially when we get into like the RAG components and stuff too. That's been a fun problem to also solve in terms of, when we're wanting to summarize threat reports or pull in more context for an alert, do we do it via RAG, or do we just pass it directly to a model that's smart enough to just pull that whole document? That's been an interesting kind of dilemma to look through as well.
Simple is always the best. Something that you said was really around, you're an advocate for AI, but you want to always differentiate between hype and reality. So I think the question is like, where is that bar today when it comes to applying agents in security operations? Like, where do you think we sort of hit the maximum amount of effectiveness when it comes to agents?
Yeah, I think with us in the industry, especially within SecOps, it's going to be how well are we augmenting all of our other tools? I don't see a place where AI is going to replace a SIM or an EDR or, the big ticket items that are required as part of our security tech stack. What I see AI doing is starting to create that single pane of glass. So how can I interact with all of these different services and get what I need out of it, which is ultimately the data, and how do I interact with that data underneath? I think that, as we're looking at like the future of SIMs and moving to data lakes and, really solving security and looking at it as a data problem from a SecOps side, it's forcing us to now think up with our other, industry folks, like, the data analytics teams and all that stuff. It's, we're starting to see that kind of bridge together. And I think the hype is going to come from when we start to see the value of AI, and it's not coming at the cost of like it being an extra tool. It's going to be a tool that's either well integrated into the existing tools, or it's going to be something that, you know, sits on top of everything that we can interact with at the same time. So I think the hype is, how can I get these benefits, without the increased budget? Or, I don't see, for example, this replacing jobs. I've always had this, and I think this is the first time saying it recorded, that I see the analyst role changing in SecOps and it become more of an investigator or a researcher, to where you're no longer analyzing, AI analyzes that. And instead you're doing the threat hunting and you're doing the more investigative type work. The analyst role is going to change, but it's not going to remove the need for a human or a resource in that as well. So that's where I think the hype of everything right now, as we're looking, there's a lot of the companies that are, the AI SOC analyst role, who's, just an AI SOC analyst there with you. We're seeing things baked into the platforms itself that have been super helpful. And so for us, it's navigating the hype and trying to follow it, while also being pragmatic to, what are we trying to solve with it, and trying to get that answer up front. That's been the exploration that we've been through at the bank of, hey, we want to use AI. What does that actually mean? And I've seen so many memes of that saying we want more AI and we don't know how to use it, but we want it. That's kind of where we're at, to where, okay, well, what's our problems? What do we want to solve, and how do we get there? I will say the one industry that I do see, or the one kind of vertical I do see within SecOps that AI is definitely going to disrupt, is the SOAR platform. I definitely see, when it comes to the enrichment of data, pulling multiple sources together, and honestly, eventually doing response activities. I do see that quickly happening, and being that an agent can go do response activities and things like that. I don't know if that sentiment is shared, but in understanding, I think, and coming from actually, building these hands-on, there is agents that have the autonomy to do stuff, but you can build guardrails in there. You can build human in the loop, and everything is still made with code. So to me, I see that happening a lot faster than maybe others see it. And that's what we want to get to, is we actually want agents to go isolate a machine. We want them to kick off an automation. We want them to kind of have a toolkit that they can use to go and, respond to alerts and actually take action, rather quickly. So I'd say that's the larger area that I see really AI changing and how we view it from a security side. But I think that that's also an industry thing, as well as, OpenAI comes out with Agent Builder. You see other things like Stack AI doing kind of more of the workflow type automation, like N8N and things like that. So I think that's just a natural drift we're going to continue to see, because a lot of that stuff is, SOAR.
If we dig a little deeper into that, do you see the disruption as a much simpler way to orchestrate response rather than having to create static playbooks, or is it more than that?
Yeah, I definitely see it as being easier. So I think it goes back to the thesis around, you know, looking at cursor and Claude Code. I can go build something that uses a language underneath the hood to go and, create something, whether it's a Python script, an automation, things like that. What I see is a way of thinking of solving our automation problems from a source standpoint, doing something like that. And whether that's a platform to do it, or if it's a Python script to do it, or things like that. I think the barrier of entry into the SOAR is going to be a lot quicker for teams to quickly pick up and start to use. The thing that I've seen, and I've run into issues because, within the ops side, at least at Live Oak, we have the engineering component too. So for us, we want a quick barrier of entry to build automations. I want, you know, newer team members that, might be junior and haven't, explored building something, can easily go pick up a SOAR and start to build. And that's the shift I think, we'll start to see, is that we'll be able to quickly onboard folks. And as people get more confident with AI and with SOAR automation, things like that, it's going to happen quicker. Just like we're seeing it in software development with agentic coding, we're going to start to see it again across the board, right? SOAR is one use case. And then the other one is just like query languages and things like that, like we talked about earlier. So I think that barrier of entry is going to be less. And then the onboarding of like, now I can focus on getting analysts that can have problem solving skills, rather than someone that's, an expert in Splunk or, XYZ security tool. They can come in and provide value right away.
Yeah, it's really just around how do we remove the need to learn platform nuance almost.
Exactly.
But then also how do we 10x our productivity. It's kind of both.
Exactly. How do we get those operational metrics down to make, our CISO happy that our mean time to detect is less and less, and same with our mean time to response without increasing budget at the same time. So I'm very optimistic that we can get there, but I'm also very pragmatic in that in 2 years from now, I don't know what any of this is going to look like. And that scares me and excites me at the same time.
Do you think that there's going to be a broader shift into companies building their own agents or using a platform's particular agents? Because I think like a big uncertainty is integration. And I think that MCP was a really interesting movement for companies to create the ability to integrate, but I don't think it's fully been realized yet.
Yes. I think you're going to see, kind of a mix of stuff. I'll say from the experience on our side with building these agents, one of the things that I think if a company's building agents on their own, the one thing that, none of like the templates or the examples that I've seen talked about is how do you move them into production? Meaning how do you make them durable? How do you make them, execute, correctly? How do you do the retry logics? How do you do the failbacks and things like that? It's very easy for me to write something locally and to create an agent locally. But if I need this agent to run, you know, by multiple team members or to run, very complex workflows for something like security, how do I bring that into production? And I do think that that is going to be, solved. And I think that there's options out there for that. But I don't I see it being that, companies will solve their own use cases with agents, but then rely on other organization and, different platforms and AI capabilities they have built into it, whether that's an MCP server or their own agents. And soon you'll kind of just see a mix of everything to where, we have agents that we have built internally. We use agents that are built into some of our products. And then, the key is getting all those to work together, which we're seeing with like MCP, the A to A communication and kind of agent handoff. I think we'll start to see more of that standardization. But yeah, kind of going back to MCP, I'll say that that was probably one of the most exciting things that I saw from security and what started this entire journey. I can't remember what podcast I listened to, but I remember exactly where I was on the road when I heard it. I was talking about MCPs, and I was like, wow, this would be awesome from security if I just could attach Claude to my security tools using an MCP. I was like, that's like the thing that clicked to me was just like, wow, that would be awesome. Like it's like it's just as simple as that. And so that's what started the entire, tinkering of, what is actually possible, what these MCPs are. And it's been really fun to explore that, both using them and then, trying to make my own for some of the tools we have internally. And it is like an art and a science because, I see a lot of MCPs that are just wrappers around an API call versus like this MCP is actually built out for agent and AI interactions. And you can definitely see that with the different MCP servers out there. So it's been really fun and really cool, but there's a lot of security risks, of course, but I'm not, skies falling down type of person. I think they're really cool.
I agree with you. I think a lot of the security risk is the same risk that we've always had with running untrusted software. It's just being overblown because AI is new and rapidly growing. And fully agree with you on everything you said with MCP. It was a huge aha moment for me as well. Even just trying to figure out from the other perspective of what would this do for a usability perspective. And we've been seeing that a lot of folks in our community at Panther are building agents on top of our MCP. So I've had the opportunity to learn from our customers on what they're doing there, and then that learning has translated back into the tools that we create. So for example, like in the next version of our MCP, we have an agent that runs in the platform for things like triage. And then we have our MCP server that can actually sort of be the intermediary in between multiple agents. So one agent that might be doing response automation can use our MCP to reach into the output of another agent. And it's not using A to A, but it's just sort of embodying that same concept of how do we sort of divide and conquer the units of work into specific domain areas that agents can be great at. And I think that ultimately is the power of building agents is you can specialize them, right? Like that's always been the key with agents. So it's really cool to see that happen in security
Yeah.
and become more production ready, like you were saying. It's certainly one thing to run, lang chain locally and be like, oh, I built this RAG thing, but it's like, okay, now make it stable for, you know, 5 nines of availability. It's a lot harder.
Yeah, and that's, kind of the mindset that we've been trying to build here. I think the thing that kind of turned from like a little passion project to a side project into this was I wanted my team to understand and be able to build these agents without having to go through the months of tinkering that I just did. So for us, it's, how can I give like these capabilities to my team to go and explore and expand upon to kind of then start to see it. I think like you and I were just saying and just, agreed upon like it's not until like you see the power of it that you're like, wow, this is actually really cool. Like this is awesome and this is something you get excited about. That's to me what cut through the hype because now it's making something more real versus, a pipe dream. You know, I can use an MTP, I can, interact with all these different tools. And when you start to see agents use multiple tools and actually come to a conclusion, then that's when everything is really, really cool.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. I mean, it's been such a blast to work in it. And I gave a talk recently at another company's customer advisory board. And when I was thinking about the talk, it's really just about like applying AI and SecOps and threat detection and things like that. The big breakthrough is that LLMs effectively allow us to start scaling human judgment. And we've always built tools around that limitation. So in SecOps, it's really shifting now from, hey, let's turn down the alert volume noise to why don't we have a LLM, an AI agent, sort of be that first layer and then escalate things up. So it's going to be really interesting to see that evolve.
Yeah. I would share that same excitement and, if I were to predict in 2 to 3 years, like majority of the tier 1 work, across organizations where we start to see it is outsourced to these LLMs and these agents, whether that's homegrown or through point products, right? These are going to be something, that's going to reshape how our tier approach works and what we as humans and as people within the ops and the SOC start like where our investigation starts. I don't think it's going to start from an alert. It's going to start from an output of an agent, like you just said.
Yeah. George, so this has been a really fun conversation. We could extend this episode to 5 hours just talking about this stuff. But I'd love to tie a bow on this show and get 3 pieces of advice from you on just building an effective SecOps program now in the age of AI.
Yeah. I would say the first one is, understand what's out there, but then understand the reality of things. I'd say for us, from the SecOps side, and kind of being more looking at it from a leadership piece. You see a lot of companies, laying off, engineers. You see kind of, the shifting of hiring and all that type of stuff. I would say from what I've seen and how much I love this, that's like my first priority is to, ensure that my team understands that this is still a very complex issue that's not going to be solved overnight or just solved by AI. So I think that piece first and from the advice is like understanding what AI is and, looking at it pragmatically, like it's not going to replace jobs. This is going to change how we work. So from a leader standpoint, and as someone, starting out in their career, understanding, what AI looks like and where things are going to go. With that, I do think, security always likes to be a little bit step behind like the regular or the regular technology. We saw that with cloud and with other things, but I think AI is going to be something that we can't fully stay behind because we're all going to be behind regardless. But I'd say that one. I'd say the other thing is to just go and just tinker, you know, pull up, Cursor or Claude Code. And, if you have an idea that you wanted to do, just go start interacting with something that is using tools. And I'm not talking about like a chat GPT or answering questions like see an LLM and see an agent use tools like how Cursor uses the file system and grep and things like that and then think of those tools and replace them with security tools or security functions. Like, oh, cool, I can have a tool that goes and looks up an IP address. And maybe that's the first LLM, or first little agent that you build. And then the second thing, just I would say, like or not second, but the third thing is just to, be optimistic of the future with AI and don't be afraid of it. Um, I think that, it's going to bring a lot of good stuff. And there's a lot of good research out there, especially with LLMs and, them being trained on cybersecurity. I know Anthropic's come out a bunch of times to say, 4.5 just came out and that it excels in cybersecurity tasks. Like that's something that should be exciting that, you know, some of these models are not just for consumer based, but now they're, going to be very helpful with cybersecurity. So, I think that there is going to be some bad side to AI and how it's used as a threat for security that we always need to keep an eye on. And I'm not talking about, risk or anything for an organization, but just how, people are going to craft vulnerabilities or, create, exploits and things like that. Like that's going to be the dark side of all this. But I'd say definitely, research it. But most importantly, what helped me the most was just playing with it and understanding it firsthand. I think all of us in security are tinkerers and we like to break things and, hack things, so to say. So why not do it with one of the LLMs out there?
So what you're saying is use LLMs to further my attacker objectives. No, George, those I love those personally, especially the Tinkerer one. As a founder, that's like very close to me. But I think it's been great to get your advice, hear your perspective, and just kind of hear about your journey through security into SecOps, but from risk and GRC and sort of your journey through from school all the way to Live Oak. So it's been really fascinating to hear your perspective, and I'm glad that you're optimistic about AI and you're seeing really great use cases for it. And I hope that other teams can start to embrace that similar mindset too.
I know everyone's journey is going to be different, but hopefully people have some fun along the way as they play with all this stuff and can be excited as you and I.
Yeah, I hope so. And I agree with you. It's not explicitly going to remove jobs in security because you still have to have experts who specialize in attacker techniques. And, I always say that security inherently is a non-engineering field. It's a technical field, not engineering though. Like that's not how I started. That's not how you started. However, we all start with like the fundamentals of how do we protect systems? What are the common ways of breaking into systems? And then that mindset is just so unique. So how do we use AI tools to fill in the other knowledge gaps? Like you said, not needing to learn a programming language, not having to learn the nuance of every single tool that you're using. Like AI can accelerate our ability to be better defenders.
100%.
So that's very exciting too. But George, thank you for coming on the show. I know you are in a leadership position. I don't know if you want to plug if you're hiring, if you're looking for folks, wanted to give you the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking for folks. The bank is growing. We're doing a lot of great things, and I will say that I never thought I'd end up back in the financial services sector after my last stint in there. I always wanted to go back into the tech world, but Live Oak has been a bed for innovation and technology. So highly recommend, if you all haven't heard of Live Oak, go check them out and just see some of the stuff that we've incubated out of there from a technology side. But yeah, always looking for fun stuff and, looking for the best of the best. So
Thank you so much. Great to have you on.
thanks, Shaq.
All right, y'all. We'll see you in the next episode, which should be in the next few weeks. Thanks for tuning in. And if you want to read more about a lot of the stuff that George and I talked about, go to detectionatscale.com. Lots of blogs, lots of good content on agents and MCP and a lot of things we mentioned there. So check that out. All right. See ya.